of reasons why moving to an EV now benefits a business. First of all, of course, there's the cost. Now, whereas the upfront purchase of an EV fleet is going to be more expensive than an internal combustion engine, you've got to factor in the running costs, maintenance, road tax, and of course the fuel. It is much cheaper in an EV. The second thing is, I think, perception and reputation. I think people these days are increasingly becoming more savvy and aware of where everything comes from. I think COVID has had a big impact on that. And I, for one, now look at where all my fruit and vegetable come from. We got into the habit of buying local and really thinking about what was available in season as well. And I think although it is slipping back, a lot of it still remains. So I think for a business to lead the way by moving to an EV fleet, it's definitely showing where their intentions lie. And I think there's a great benefit to their reputation with their customers by doing that. And I think finally, it just helps meet net zero targets. We know we have a climate emergency. We know that mobility and transport is the fastest growing contributor to that. And anything that businesses can do to help reduce that is obviously going to help them and their economy and their efficiency targets as well. So I think there are benefits to companies who are early EV adopters. I think the first one is their reputation. I think people over the last few years have become very switched on to how businesses behave, whether it be where they pay their tax and the amount of tax that they pay, or how they move their goods and services around and how they serve us. So I think from a customer perspective, there is an awful lot to be said for how strong a business's reputation can be and how much it can be enhanced by actually taking some responsibility and making that switch to EVs now. Of course, there's the cost as well. We know that businesses will benefit in the long term from making that switch. There is the upfront investment, and particularly if they're going to invest in a smart charging infrastructure, but there are government incentives and there is help at hand. And we know that over the lifetime of a commercial vehicle, it does come out cheaper, and these are just simply facts. And of course, it also just helps with targets, with emission targets and corporate sustainability targets. So I think there are huge benefits for businesses that actually want to make the switch now, even though it may not look like the easiest route. There's no question that there are perceived barriers in place for businesses looking to move to EVs. The first is, of course, cost. We know EVs cost more expensive. They are more expensive to buy upfront. However, we also know, and it is a fact, that EVs have a lower running cost. So really, we need to educate people and show them how this cost, how these savings can actually, what they can expect to see over a month, over a year, over 10 years, or however long they expect to have vehicles within their fleet. So cost is always the first thing that you need to really explain to people. And then, of course, there's this charging infrastructure and range problem, and they really go hand in hand. Now, the charging infrastructure has for a long time been cited as a real problem, and it is a problem for many people and for many businesses. But it is increasing at an alarming rate. If you actually look at a map of the UK and see how many charging points there are now compared to 2 years ago, it's growing tremendously, and more charging points are coming online every month at more and more venues as well. The other thing to talk about when it comes to the charging points is the reliability of those chargers. Now, a lot of the very early chargers that were first installed weren't really that technical, and we are seeing a lot of failure rate in those chargers. And that's why some of those big players are now really investing heavily in upgrading the chargers that are there, so that people don't have the hugely frustrating situation of turning up at a charger that says that it's free only to find that it's out of order. So that's going to change as well. And then, of course, there's the range in vehicles that goes hand in hand. Now, this is a funny one because When you're talking about EVs, you have to talk about efficiency, and efficiency is everything. It's from how energy leaves the battery and how it is delivered to the tires. When the first electric vehicles were coming to market, they very often were retrofitted. So it was a vehicle that was already in production that had its internal combustion engine taken out and was retrofitted with an electric vehicle powertrain. Now, this means that where the battery went, where the electric motor went, and how the drive was delivered was not necessarily in the most efficient layout. So range, even though these vehicles might have had a sizable battery, the range wasn't so good because the way that energy was used and the power delivered to the wheels wasn't in the most efficient order. But what we're seeing now is more and more vehicles coming to market that have actually been designed specifically as an EV. So they are an electric vehicle from the ground up. That means that where the battery is and how the powertrain is laid out is the most efficient that it can be. And that's why we're now seeing cars come to market with much greater range. And as the range increases in cars, whether it be entry-level cars, luxury cars, or even commercial vehicles, as that range starts to increase, the requirement for charging infrastructure changes, and then we really start answering our own problems, if you like. So we talk a lot about EVs being the answer, but of course, EVs are not suitable for all applications. We need to look at things like HGVs, but also, and something that's not talked about very often, is in some of the really remotest parts of the world, which simply don't have a power supply. How are we supposed to use an EV, for example, in the Arctic Circle? Now, I think this is where hydrogen plays a significant part, and it's not really been talked about a very great deal. The difficulty with hydrogen is that for many years, the production of hydrogen was very unenvironmentally friendly. So it's only now when we really can start economically producing green hydrogen that it becomes a player that people are happy to start looking at. Of course, with hydrogen, you're going to be filling your vehicle much like you do with petrol or diesel, and the car will then create its own electricity source from that hydrogen. You're still having an EV, but you are using hydrogen as the fuel source to generate the power. So there are many applications where hydrogen, as I say, in particularly HGVs, it's going to be a winner, because you can't really have an EV powertrain in a heavy goods vehicle because it will simply just be too inefficient. And this is where hydrogen will definitely come to the fore. The other big problem with hydrogen is, of course, it's extremely flammable. And so when we're looking at a hydrogen infrastructure, we really have to start from scratch. How this hydrogen is moved around, how it's transported, how it's stored, and how vehicles can safely fuel with the hydrogen without having some catastrophic accident. So all of this is in place. Many manufacturers, including Jaguar Land Rover, are trialing hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And it will definitely be an alternative for many people, because, as I say, EVs are the answer to a lot of our problems, particularly in the Western developed world, but there are many other parts of the world where it simply isn't as feasible. So we've talked about the benefits of EVs and how they are less environmentally impactful than internal combustion engine. Of course, there are still going to be types of internal combustion engine on our roads for many years to come, because the 2030 UK announcement is only applicable to new vehicles. Now, it's not just vehicles on the road that create carbon. We also have many other industries that have a huge part to play: air transport, and in particular shipping as well, which is traditionally a very dirty type of transport as well. And within these industries, there are many technologies being trialed. There's carbon capture, and there's also a technology involved with the shipping industry where they are looking to capture the exhaust fumes from a ship's engine and clean them up before they are emitted into the environment.